Once again, ladies and gentlemen, an absolutely warm welcome to the Singapore FinTech Festival 2020 Green Shoots series. Now, today we are focusing on infrastructure, and we've got a fantastic cast of members who will be coming on screen in just a bit, touching on the topic of Planet of the APIs. Our moderator for this session, she is Suzanne Kishti, Chief Executive Officer, FinTech Circle. And our speakers for this session, they include Dr. David Hardoon, Senior Advisor for Data and Artificial Intelligence, UnionBank of the Philippines; Todd Schweitzer, Co-founder and Chief Executive Officer, Brankas; Kahina Dyke, Global Head of Digital Channels and Data Analytics, CCIB, Standard Chartered Bank. And we've also have Pranav, Seth, Head of Digital and Innovation, Senior Vice President, OCBC Bank, and Luca Martinetti, Co-founder and CTO, TrueLayer. Let's welcome all of them.
Hello and good morning or good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. I'm calling in from London, and welcome to our panel, Planet of the APIs. It's very exciting to have you all with us today and to talk about such an important topic of application programming interfaces. And you know, my belief is that APIs are changing the financial world. They have started to change it in the last few years. But over the last few years, with new regulation coming into play globally, we've seen much more pressure on using APIs in a strategic way. And today in our panel, we have got speakers from both the FinTech community, the FinTech startups and scale-ups, and we have got leading banks represented to give their perspectives about how APIs are being used in practice and how actually APIs can help you to gain a competitive edge when you think about the future of FinTech, the future of finance. And so what I would love to do now is to ask each of my panelists to introduce themselves briefly. Then we will get into the discussion about how APIs can change your strategic perspective, how FinTech companies and banks collaborate in practice, and what are the things which do work and what are the things which don't work, which we want to improve on. So that's the goal of our panel discussion. So very engaging, very interactive, and I'm very happy that you're all joining us today for this very important session. So if I can ask, please, each of my panelists to introduce themselves, maybe starting with Kahina.
Hi, hello everybody. It's great to be here. I'm Kahina Dyke, and I'm responsible for the digital channels and data analytics at Standard Chartered. And yeah, I'm looking forward to a lively discussion today with everyone.
That's great, Kahina. Thank you. Can I hand over to Todd, please?
Sure. Good afternoon, good morning, everyone. My name is Todd Schweitzer, the CEO and co-founder of Brankas. Brankas is an open banking technology startup operating across Southeast Asia. And we operate in Singapore, Indonesia, Philippines, Vietnam, Thailand, and soon in Bangladesh. Very nice to meet everyone.
Great, Todd. Thank you very much. If I hand over to David, please.
Hi, thank you very much. And good morning, good evening, and good afternoon. I feel like a bit like the Truman Show. So again, I'm the Senior Advisor for Data and Artificial Intelligence at the UnionBank of the Philippines. We're very much focusing on how to adopt and leverage data and part of APIs and the ecosystem. And prior to this, I was the first Chief Data Officer and Special Advisor for Artificial Intelligence at the Monetary Authority of Singapore. So looking forward to the conversation with everyone.
That's excellent. Thank you very much. And can I ask Luca, please?
Hi, I'm Luca Martinetti. I'm the co-founder and CTO of TrueLayer. TrueLayer is a fintech platform. We provide APIs for accessing bank data and initiate payments in the UK and all across Europe.
Fantastic, Luca. Thank you. And Pranav.
Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. Right. Thanks for having me on this panel. I look at the digital and innovation agenda for OCBC Bank. As part of that, I've had the opportunity to lead our efforts to integrate fintechs into our offerings, as well as look at work with ecosystem partners to create new business models and solutions for our customers. So API has been a bedrock for all these initiatives.
Fantastic, Pranav. That's great. So welcome. Thank you very much for joining me today. And maybe if I can start out asking Luca from TrueLayer, when you look at finance overall, Luca, why have open APIs become such an important conversation topic? And how does it improve your competitive edge when you have an API strategy in place? And what does it actually mean, when we talk about an API strategy?
Sure. So if we look at the story here in Europe of open banking, it all started, as you know, with PSD2. And in the UK in particular, this was really meant to increase competition, because for a long time, group of banks really monopolized the market. And the idea of creating API that give access to data and payment allows challenger bank and competition to really create experience that didn't exist before. So today, what we see is mainly two use cases where open banking is really shining. And one is digital onboarding. So through the data that you can access that is owned by the bank, you can make processes that historically had been very manual, digital, and immediate. And this really simplifies KYC and KYB in marketplaces, for example. And another incredibly exciting use case is bank-to-bank payment. And bank-to-bank payment is growing rapidly. And what we believe at TrueLayer is that in the next 5 years, it will be the default payment method used for e-commerce and financial application. And having an API strategy really means being able to be part of this ecosystem, be able to play in a different world where the experience is really embedded in the application that the user uses every day. So the bank becomes a service and is embedded through APIs inside the application that we use. And we've seen that happening in different kind of sector and a different kind of verticals, if you want. So going from challenger banks to FinTech app for either saving or investing, marketplaces, and even justice. So the bank is becoming more connected than it has ever been. An interesting number is that we've seen the number of open banking users, so users that access the open banking services, double in the last 6 months here in the UK. So it's a really exciting time to be part of this financial ecosystem, I think.
That's great, Luca. I know I'm also based in the UK, so I agree. I think we see lots of changes and lots of positive development, since the introduction of PSD2 and open banking standards. And if I can ask Todd to comment on that from your perspective as CEO, again, leading FinTech company in this space, why do you think the open API is so important? How do you interpret the open and the API strategies to be put in place?
Yeah, so thanks for that, Suzanne. And I admire what TrueLayer has accomplished a lot in the UK and across Europe. And it's an interesting contrast, I think, what TrueLayer is doing versus what Brankas is doing, because the UK open banking started as a compliance exercise, right? This was a mandate that the top 9 banks have to provide certain API products. And this was seen as a means of, stimulating competition for consumer and SME banking, right? In Southeast Asia, there are none of these mandates or regulations, right? This is entirely a commercially driven, bottom-up opportunity that certain banks, I have to say, UnionBank is definitely one of them, if not at the top of the pack when it comes to kind of thinking this way. OCBC is certainly there as well, very much a leader in Singapore in terms of thinking API-driven products, right? But it's important to draw this distinction, right? Open banking and outside of a handful of markets is a commercially driven initiative, and this is, I think, a good thing because this is allowing, in the theme of green shoots, this is allowing kind of market-driven commercial opportunities to productize APIs as a means of either distributing financial services in a much more economical way, or acquiring customers, as Luca alluded to, in a more in a partner-driven model, or in a more digital-first way. And why this is particularly so important in Southeast Asia is because we're talking about countries. For me, Southeast Asia is not Singapore. It's huge markets like Indonesia, Philippines, Vietnam, and in the Philippines, we're talking about 60% of the population that still is unbanked, right? It's a little bit better in Indonesia. It's a little bit better in Vietnam, but we're talking about a majority of adults that still do not have access to bank accounts, primarily because the incumbent banks do not see it profitable to bank this type of customer, right? So I think what's so exciting about open APIs in the real world, in developing markets, is the fact that open API products change the economics to make it more profitable and frankly easier to reach and bank the consumer and SME segments that have been neglected in the past in a much more efficient and frankly a much more customer-centric way of doing so.
Yes, I think it's so true, Todd, what you're saying, and I think it's so important, for all of us who are calling in from let's say Europe or from the States, to understand the specific needs and requirements in lots of Southeast Asian countries where APIs have been used for financial inclusion as well, and really to make sure that we're giving access to millions of people who have not access to financial services yet, because it has been too expensive. And now with APIs, open APIs can be done at a much low cost way, which I think is really important. So that's both top down and bottom up, where it makes perfect sense to use APIs. And what I would love to do now is to go to our banking representatives, maybe starting with Kahina. And when we had our call prior to our conference this week, I learned from Kahina, both, Kahina, that you have been a tech expert and leader in the Silicon Valley. Now you work for Standard Chartered as a leader in the financial services. You really bridge both sides. You understand technology, you understand the financial services world. And what I wanted to ask you, because my experience with banks in the UK was that lots of banks initially saw APIs as a threat to them, as a competitive threat to do, the whole regulation surrounding and forcing almost banks to open up. And I wanted to understand better from your point of view, do you see APIs more as a competitive threat or as an opportunity, and why?
Yeah. So thank you. So yes, as you said, I started as a banker, international banker, and I just spent the last 5 years in Silicon Valley. So I have the unique privileged position of being sitting on both sides of the table. And I think I was around when PSD2 happened in Europe. I was in Europe. I was working for a big financial institution, and it was seen as a threat, right? It's like, what does this mean? Why do we need to open up? Like, we're a bank. We're supposed to close it down. We're supposed to not give out information. And so it was a real mind shift for banking to understand how this technology was going to be used to drive better value propositions. And the FinTech industry really emerged out of that opening up. And so a lot of the innovation that was happening early on in FinTech in the UK and Europe was because of the regulatory push, let's say, the incentive. But I think what's happened now is that we have evolved as an industry. And when I say the industry, I include banking and FinTech and tech, because we're all part of this same industry around delivering financial services in the most efficient, inclusive way that drives prosperity. And I think when you think about API banking, what is it really about, and why is it important for Standard Chartered? We look at ourselves, we are the leading emerging markets bank. We have been there for 150 plus years. That's what we do. Those are the markets we serve. And technology and open banking ecosystems allow us to reach our clients, make it easier for them to connect with us in the ways that they want to connect. And if you really talk about what is the power of technology? The power of technology is to provide more access, more efficiency to our clients and to the communities we're serving. So we've been on a great extraordinary journey this year, like everyone else. The numbers have been doing, exponential growth in the number of clients who are connecting to us, the markets that we've had to stand up, and the volume that we're seeing through our APIs. And I think there's only one way to go, and that's up. So while the banks might have been scared in the beginning, I can only speak for us. We are really excited, and API banking and open banking is part of our platform strategy, our digital platform strategy. So it's we're believers, and I think most of the industry is following suit.
Fantastic, Kahina. That's great to hear. And so maybe let me ask David. David, what's your perspective? From you, do you see it more as a threat or as an opportunity, the whole API development?
Well, again, first of all, thank you very much. I always used to kind of half joke that banks do frenemies really, really badly. So when you come in and purely look at this from a traditional margins, profit type of approach, then yeah, it's a threat because anything new is fundamentally a threat. But rather than treating it as a threat, we need to kind of do two fundamental things. One is the acceptance that it is going to be a reality, just as regulation has happened. And perhaps to add to Todd's earlier point, it's already happening in Asia. I mean, BSP is already looking at it. Recently, what's happened in Singapore with the fact that accounts balances can be aggregated across multiple accounts that you're holding. I mean, that walks like a duck, smells like a duck, quacks like a duck. That's a duck. That's open banking with or without the regulation. So the approach that we've taken is realizing that in the end of the day, it's how do we achieve the end goal? And the end goal is, and specifically thinking about the Philippine economy, financial inclusion. It's about how do we make a difference and how do we get to that 65% of the population which isn't banked or underserved. The only way to do that is by looking at this as an ecosystem, looking at this as a partnership play. And yes, there's some friendly competition there, but it is about that. It's about frenemies. It's seeing whereby we can cooperate together and make a difference. Because in the end of the day, finance is about people and enabling people. It's not about people living for finance. That is a crucial perspective that APIs are enabling. And that's why it is so absolutely exciting.
Yes, great, David. No, I love that comment. Finance is to enable people's life. It's not the other way around. So I think that's what we all have to remind ourselves, and totally agree with that. And Pranav, how do you see that for you, from your point of view, your strategy? Do you see it more as a threat, as an opportunity? Where do you position yourself?
Well, as we talked about, right? I think in Singapore it was a very, very competitively driven bottom-up commercial initiative. So we definitely see it as an opportunity, right? 5 years ago, when we started our lab, we call it the open vault, right? As Kahina was saying, right? Banks were trying to close things, and our idea was to open up the doors, right? Open up the walls so we can connect our data, get our customers, to enjoy services that we take their data, give it to some of the trusted partners. And then that worked very well for the first phase of, APIs, open APIs for us and Singapore, where we were more connecting and leveraging other services outside of the bank, right, to create new services. So whether it was advisory platforms, whether it was, chatbots, artificial intelligence kind of services. So it was more connecting out, sending some data out, bringing it back in. Right, as the ecosystem evolved in Singapore, when the notion of trust, the notion of data security, and the way the SG Financial Index evolved under the aegis of the digital identity driven by SG with MyInfo, right now I think the battlefield or the opportunity field has opened up to allow more and more people to join in and for us to create better solutions. For us now, we see that innovation on core products is hard, right? The more products are getting commoditized. If we have to win, we have to really, really go out, solve whether it's retirement needs, healthcare needs, or payroll needs, or account payable needs of our customers, and add value there with banking as a background. And for that, the partnerships, the API infrastructure required to that is competitive advantage. It is a way to win the market rather than to be defensive about anything.
That's true. That's, I think, a great point, Pranav. And in London, when we talk about often, the implementation of fintech solutions in practice, sometimes we conclude that we've not seen them rolled out at scale. There's lots of talk about collaboration, about partnerships, but when you actually look at, products being rolled out to millions of customers, there's not yet enough sometimes, where we can see that's really what is thanks to the fintech sector. And on the B2C side there is, but often B2B2C, we are missing that. So I wanted to ask you, when saying, Pranav, with you now, when you think about your most successful case studies, where you implemented API at scale, maybe in a partnership with fintech companies or on your own, what would you be most proud of? What would you like to share with us, where you roll it out to large millions of customers and it works very well? What would be a good example for that?
Well, for Singapore, millions of customers is a bit hard because we are 3 million bankable customers. But we've had a lot of successes, right? So let me just give a few things that come on top of my mind, right? We run the largest property listing portal in Singapore, right? We are a bank which runs a healthcare app for tele-advisory, right? We have created a new business model where different companies can exchange their loyalty points, right? Now, I think each of these things, I would say, is in a different form of evolution and adoption. But the One Advisor where we have created the whole home buying journey along with partners, from finding a house, getting the mortgage done in less than a minute, all digitally, right, to going into the house and renovating it, getting the renovating loan, getting the ideas about the renovation, right? That portal has generated more than $1 billion of loan for us, this year alone, right? Okay. And so, whether customers come directly to us, we can take it to our partners, or whether they come to our partner site, the home listing sites or the agent sites, we can bring them to our mortgage process and complete that end-to-end journey, right, in a seamless manner.
That's fantastic, Pranav. I wish we would have that here in London. At least I'm not aware of it yet, but it sounds fantastic. Maybe Kahina, if I can ask you, what are the biggest success stories you are proud of, where API really has been implemented at scale?
Yeah, no, it's a really important question, because sometimes we feel like, is this real? Is this solving real world problems, or is this some sort of experiment? And what I can tell you is, what we've seen is this is offering real value. So there's 3 countries that come to mind, because that's the way we think, right, in multiple markets. In Kenya, we worked with one of our clients who's a healthcare supply chain business, and we automated their entire payments process that helped facilitate supplier payments, which expedited the shipping of medical supplies during this critical time in the pandemic, right? And so that sounds really, how does that help? Well, it got supplies out quicker. In India, we helped an insurance company deliver zero-touch instant issuance of insurance policies, because even in a pandemic, people still need insurance policies. And because we were able to do both settlement and notification of payments in real time, they were able to issue. So that's a real world example that our client had to pivot their entire process during COVID. In Hong Kong, we helped, a real estate management company take rents via QR codes, which meant elderly people didn't have to leave their house to pay their rent. These are the types of things that are real world solutions that impact human beings and impact people when we apply the technology solutions in the right way. So I think those are 3 examples, but there's many more, and I think there's many more to come.
Excellent, Kahina. It's super exciting. Just listening to you and Pranav, I almost think we have to turn our webinar and our session now into a blog post about how it has been implemented already worldwide. That's really exciting. And maybe, David, if I can come to you, what are the things you're most proud of, and what have you rolled out already?
Yeah, perhaps in the same spirit. We can't ignore, the fact that we're having the session digitally of what's been the impact of COVID-19. And the reality that thankfully government, and a lot of bodies have been coming out and providing support to people who really need them. Now, let me give you and paint the picture of how this has helped. Is in this situation of Philippines, you have multiple locations which are actually fundamentally disconnected. These are rural banks. These are locations which are not even on the national payments platforms. Now, during the pandemic, we were basically able to roll out and implement, various innovations to enable the cash outs. And to give a very, very specific example is the, Philippines Department of Social Welfare and Development was able to leverage on essentially the bank's solution. This was the I2I network in order to distribute their social amortization program, providing financial support. This is cash in hand to those who need it most during the COVID-19 pandemic, when we're all aware how significantly the distribution as a whole has been significantly impacted. So this is, this is what I was mentioning earlier. It's about people, and it's about how do we fundamentally leverage all these wonderful technological gadgets, these capabilities, but in the end of the day, putting it together, not as a theoretical concept, not as a proof of concept that never leaves a lab, but an actuality, coming together, putting aside our competitive nature in order to result in an impact and making a difference. And honestly, this is, to me, one of the many, but one of the examples that I'm tremendously proud of that this bank has been involved in.
Fantastic, David. It sounds, you have to be proud on that, because it really improves, human life, it does 100%. And it just reminds me, because we launched last week, we launched the first film on FinTech. It's called The Future of FinTech. And it talks about, how FinTech and the financial service sector has helped during the pandemic. And I wish I would have spoken to all of you beforehand, because I could have interviewed you for this film as well, because it really showcases, our role, how we as a sector together, working together really can change people's lives and even make it better, in such a difficult time as we had this year. And maybe what I would love to do now is to come to our FinTech, our FinTech companies, back to Luca and back to Todd. And both of you, of course, are working at the most, innovative edge, trying to move those solutions that you just talked about forward and enabling them as well. And so if I could ask, maybe starting with Todd first, tell us.
Oh, I think I lost Susan. But I'm going to comment, and before we hear back from Susan, I'll comment on what I've heard previously. So I think really interesting examples from the rest of the panelists. I have to point out, though, all payment related, and that's important. I think it's super important, because so much of B2B and consumer payments have so many middlemen. Just think of just to pick on the large card schemes, right? Just imagine, it's actually, you can see that there's 5 or 6 or 7 intermediaries in a typical cards transaction. So even the fact that the UK, Luca's saying that the UK he's anticipating more bank-to-bank transfers. That's more efficiency in the system, and that's fantastic. And certainly in Southeast Asia, where card penetration is very low, sub 10% in most of these markets, enabling easier bank transfer on the consumer and commercial side is so important. However, I want to make the distinction that payments is not the end all be all of open bank, or I should say payments and account data is just the beginning of open banking, right? And some of the use cases we've seen coming out of the COVID pandemic, number one is account opening, right? So Luca alluded to this a little bit. I know some of the banker panelists are working on products for this. But basically enabling digital account opening. A market like the Philippines is super sadly branch centric. It's remarkable how little you can do with most of these banks outside of a physical brick and mortar branch.
But
right?
I just have to, not to cut you, but I just have to jump in and say exactly on that point. So when we're in the heightens of the quarantine, basically in Manila, we onboarded 300,000 people with no branch effect.
That's right. And let me add to this. So while UnionBank was onboarding new customers because they have a digital onboarding flow, I know one of the largest banks literally stopped all new account acquisition for 2 months. Why? Because they needed to set up their VPN They needed to procure like 5,000 laptops for their staff. I'm not joking. I mean, this is like literally a top bank trying to figure out how to do remote. And in the meantime, customer acquisition came to a complete halt, right? So account opening is one. Another one is around identity authentication and basically having a portable identity. And, especially in many of these markets that do not have a national identity database, your bank credentials, your KYC bank credentials serve as a proxy ID. So I think that's really interesting. We're also seeing really cool use cases around loan origination and kind of seamless access to credit linked to fintech products. So, you can think of account data and payments as a starting point for open banking, and there's tons of value there. And tons of inefficiency to be addressed. But I think the next generation is actually productizing these APIs into proper products that can be, used in partnership with fintechs, or even enabling fintechs to build those products and be a partner to the bank, right? But it does require some internal culture and change within some of these legacy institutions to allow for that to happen, because you start stepping on toes internally at some of these banks.
Yeah, that's absolutely true, Todd. Like another interesting aspect is not just for the consumer, but also for the businesses. So during the pandemic here in the UK, we've seen so many SMEs really struggling to survive during the lockdowns. And an interesting number is that we've seen that 50% of the SMEs accessed open banking services during the pandemic. And this really links to exactly what you said. So opening account, getting access to credit, and payment is key also in this area. Like if you really facilitate a money transfer with a immediate account to account funds transfer with very low fee, this really helps the real economy move faster, and the liquidity that it provides.
And Luca, specifically, for you, TrueLayer, maybe you can tell us what are the specific enabling factors, the best solutions you offer, you provide?
So we offer a set of solution around AAS, so account data and balances, transaction, but also the different kind of payments. So bank-to-bank payment, mandates, and everything that is available in the open banking PSD2 offering right now in the UK, and we're also expanding in what we call premium APIs. So we believe there's a lot of room for identity information, for example, and we're really looking forward to the new latest development, that is what we call variable recurring payment, that will effectively be an alternative to having a credit card on file. So a way for a merchant to charge an account a variable amount recurringly. The biggest enabler that we've seen, and this is not obvious, are not necessarily the APIs themselves, but the user journey. So the user experience, we learned, is so fundamental to remove friction in both the onboarding and the payment flow. The biggest step that we've seen is when most of the high street banks here in the UK, most of the CMA9, dramatically improved with app-to-app authentication. So instead of having to go through a multi-step login flow where the user need to provide a lot of factors to authenticate, in a mobile experience, the user is redirected directly into their bank application, and then they can authenticate with biometric factors like fingerprint or Face ID. That effectively means that you can pay a merchant for a service or transfer money in a financial application without entering any factor. And that makes the experience really smooth and really easy for the end user. So I would say that the frontier now is on variable recurring payment, identity data more extensively that can really provide an accurate KYC, KYB alternative, and user experience.
This makes sense, Luca. And you mentioned premium APIs just before. And with premium APIs, do you mean specifically APIs helping you with identification, or is there something else which makes it premium?
it's a little bit of a buzzword if you want. That's not very well specified term, but what we mean is, I think what Todd and David said before, that open banking is not just a compliant exercise. It can be commercially driven, can be a business opportunity for banks. So banks are not really monetizing a lot of the data they hold, and they can play much bigger part in the payment ecosystem that they do right now, because there are, as Todd said, many intermediaries in your average credit card transaction. So Premium API is pretty much anything that is not mandated by regulator, but where the bank can create a business model and can monetize their access. And we've seen a lot of attention. We've seen prototypes. We've seen things getting very close to be on the market. And so I believe 2021 will be very exciting on this front in UK and Europe.
That's great. Thank you, Luca. And Luca, can I ask you about TrueLayer's customer base? Are your customers mainly banks, or are your customers mainly fintech companies? How do you segment your client base, and who one do you see growing most?
That's a very good question, because it really depends where you draw the line. Like, what is a bank and what is a fintech? So we work with a lot of challenger banks like Revolut, for example, across Europe, but also fintech companies that are around saving and investment, like Plum or Chip here in the UK. But also we enable top-up of wallets in a more general sense. So you can think about the iGaming space, for example, or betting. And payment in general is such a ubiquitous and large need that really touch many industries. We also work with the government, for example. Like, one of the clients that I really didn't expect is Digital Justice here in the UK, where through open banking data, they can take decision of providing financial aid for low-income individuals using open banking API. So it's really broad what you can do with that. And what we believe that more no-financial company will start using open banking for their business. So thinking e-commerce and marketplaces, for example.
That's interesting. Interesting, because just yesterday I was giving a keynote on legal tech, legal technology. And I had not realized yet, that of course you can use and you should use APIs also in this area. So that's a good point you made, Luca. Just coming, Todd, to you in terms of your customer base. Is your customer base mainly banks, or is it mainly fintech companies? How do you segment them?
Yeah, so I'm glad you asked, because again, emerging economies, and especially in Southeast Asia, basically ex-Singapore, the banks need a lot of help becoming API ready, right? So Brankas does not have the benefit of the regulatory mandate. So in order to build up the supply, we've made the conscious decision to work with the banks to provide, and we've basically provided and built out a product which is essentially a middleware layer that allows for any bank with any core banking system on-premise or on cloud to launch a set of open API products, your basic API services around authentication, identity, payments, statement data, in a matter of days. And it's something we're really proud of, and it enables those banks that are believers, as Kahina said, that not all banks are believers yet, but those who are believers can really go to market quicker. And just to call names a little bit, the typical in Southeast Asia, if you're a bank looking to build out an open API layer, the typical approach is you go to one of the large enterprise IT vendors, the IBMs of the world, right? And they're going to quote you on a 2-year project in the tens of millions of dollars. And it's not even their core competency, right? What they really want to do is re-architect your whole core banking backend, right? And I think the power of open APIs on the bank side is not only unlocking new revenue streams, but the ability to decouple your core banking system, however old it is, from fintech services and connections to fintech. So I give that context because in a market, like Indonesia or Philippines or Thailand or Vietnam, it's actually essential for a company like Brankas to work with the banks to help build up the supply side, right? Because there are very few banks like UnionBank in the Philippines that have actually well-documented APIs with a proper API team, product team ready to connect to, right? I mean, they're really an outlier. So the rest of the pack need help, right? And so we provide that help, and that also helps us then commercialize those API products on behalf of the banks to customers, right? And those customers indeed can be fintechs. There's a lot of online lenders, payment gateways that are eager to offer direct debit as a solution, as well as e-commerce shops, online businesses that are looking for faster ways to enable their customers to pay, and they don't want to pay the 5 or 6% total transaction cost for accepting cards. Not that many customers have cards anyway. I think the expanding segment we're seeing, as Luca mentioned earlier, is the kind of the B2B segment, right? So enabling APIs, and Kahina pointed this out too, right? And providing APIs that connect to corporate clients of the bank directly. So we're not talking about fintech partnerships. We're talking literally about a corporate transaction banking solution that plugs into a corporate client's ERP system, perhaps, or maybe they have some new online property, right? But it's enabling, it's delivering a corporate banking product to the bank, to the client of the bank, but just in a new way. And it's not through a relationship manager and a 9-month IT project that they've negotiated with the bank's IT team. It's by accessing APIs that the bank has made available.
Yes. I think what you're talking about now is so fascinating because it's about the ecosystem. It's about really how everybody has got a role to play in this large global fintech ecosystem, from fintech companies, startups, scale-ups, the large banks, the clients of the banks, of course, the regulators. And it's important to be able to think in networks. What are the network effects? What are our direct benefits we provide? What are the benefits our clients get? What goes down the value chain? And to think in these collaborative terms, to really make gain the benefit, which our industry can have, and the impact it can have on our industry, but also in all the other industries in which we are working with. And so what I would love to ask maybe Kahina is, in terms of fintech strategy overall, how do you see the future of finance evolving? So it's a very strategic question. Long term, how do you see really the future of finance evolving between banks, fintech companies, and we didn't talk about them yet, technology giants, the tech giants, which we know are coming in, from all sides, all countries. How do you see this power play, between our three partners, almost you could say, and how do you want to position, Standard Chartered in your case, in this fintech ecosystem?
Yeah, so I love this question because I worked at a big tech giant, one of the global ones that's in every single country. I've worked at a FinTech, global FinTech startup, which is really hungry to break open and, new ways of doing old things. And I came back into banking. And so I really have thought a lot about where are we going? And for me, it's really simple. Each of those stakeholders have a unique value proposition and unique capabilities that deliver solutions. And some of them deliver their piece of the solution really, really, really well. I mean, when you look at some of the client experience and the way it's delivered seamlessly with Silicon Valley and big tech companies, they're good. They're really good at delivering client experience. When you look at the fintech companies, they're really good at solving old problems in new ways and leveraging technology. I loved what Todd said. Todd was like, identity, right? Onboarding, automated instant credit, like all of these things that have all of these opportunities that the fintech companies are saying, let's go tackle that problem because there's so many problems. And then banks, right? We have a core competency in what we do. And so I have this simple approach to partnership. The first thing is we've got to work together because the problems are so vast and deep. and it's an ecosystem shift, and it's a systematic change that we are going to have to all work together. But to work together, we have to understand what we each bring to the party. What are we bringing to the table? And so I look at this as the institutions who are open for partnerships, who are believers in technology, need to be working with, and I talk about the banking institutions, need to be working with companies like the companies that are here on this panel today, and other great companies, other great fintech companies. And the big tech companies, it's not one eating the other. And I think that whole notion that are the big tech going to take over the banks, the banks going to take over the fintech, or the fintech's going to become the new banks, is just not really the right way to look at it. The companies that are going to win in 10 years are the companies who know what they're good at, and guess what they're not so great at, and then they partner for the things that they need to bring into their platform to deliver better solutions to their clients. So, I know the collaboration is overused, but really the cooperation word and understanding the strengths and the developmental areas, and not trying to be everything. Don't spread yourself like peanut butter, delivering everything to your clients. Create strong platforms, and then bring in great partners to deliver value-added services. So I'm having sat in the seat of all of those seats in big tech, fintech, and banking, there is no one winner. And I think that's what we have to get out of a win-lose, and get into a win-win solution-oriented ecosystem, which is hard for a shift for a very competitive industry that we're in.
That's great. I think that's lots of takeaways, what you just said, Kahina. So there's not one winner, which means there are lots of winners, so lots of winners will be out there, which is, I think, a very positive, of course, opportunity, for so many stakeholders and so many players in our ecosystem. Maybe if I can come to David, UBP, what's your strategy? How do you see the future of finance evolving and your role in it?
Yeah, no, thank you for that. Actually, I very much agree with what Kahina was saying earlier. In fact, not to repeat that point, is very much an ecosystem play, very much a win-win environment in terms of what we're good at and how we can collaborate in areas where others may be even better from that perspective. So it's really about ecosystem and collaboration. But I want to add one more point, which I think is critical in this cooperation, collaborative approach, whereby we need to remember strongly that in the end of the day, in a financial-oriented environment, there's a fiduciary responsibility for our consumers, for our customers. And that's independent as to whether you are currently regulated or whether you will be in the coming future. So we need to make sure that whatever we're doing while driving for innovation, while driving for phenomenal solutions that do make a fundamental difference, it is all done with customers in the center, privacy, governance, and safety.
I think that's very well said, very true. I think that's something we always have to remind ourselves, exactly, that we are in a regulated environment. And that's, that's good for that, because in other areas where we're not regulated, people can't stand up for their rights, they can't defend, they can't fight for what's good. But we are in a regulated environment, which gives a certain framework to operate in. And so that's definitely, one thing we always have to remind ourselves, which is unique, of course, to our sector. And maybe, Pranav, if I can come to you now as a almost you to get your final words, for your strategy at OCBC and how you see the future of finance evolving in your role.
Yeah, thank you. Let me, build on what, David was saying, as we don't know how to deal with frenemies, right? And I think Kahina was also referring to it, whether we work with some other partners, will they own the customer? Will they, earn the economic rents of that relationship? I think those are very, very valid questions. I think nobody knows the answers to it. So the strategy that we are playing with is that if someone can deliver a service better than we can, right, we are happy to be the pipes behind. We are happy to be the utility behind. And no one has really won that as of now. I don't think anyone has taken away the bank's, existence. But any big tech that has come to it and said that, hey, enable payments for us, we've taken that with open arms, right? Because if they are able to finally create more value for the customers, with we being the primary fiduciary responsible, legally responsible entity holding the funds, we are happy to do that. Yet at the same time, using all the technology available to us, it is very critical for us that we know how we add value to our customers, beyond the basic banking products, right? And for us, it is about wealth planning. It is about retirement. It is about, how you buy, sell, operate your business. And how do we leverage partnerships? How do we leverage APIs to create end-to-end solutions that only we, with the better knowledge about our customers based on data from this ecosystem, can deliver to our clients, right? So it's hard to say winner, who will win, who will lose. I think we got to all play our cards. We can't just be a banking as a service and lose our relationship with the customer. That's for sure. We want to create really, really strong customer engagement points with other partners from the ecosystem, with other services that sit on top of banking. That's how we are playing it.
Great words, Pranav. Thank you for that. And I totally agree, with what you said. I think it's really about reaching out to each other and also being humble. And I know that our conversation comes to an end in 2 minutes. So maybe I want to summarize, what I learned, by listening to you, talking to all of you today. And I think it comes down to being humble, to understand what are your strengths, what are your weaknesses in your role, in this fintech, global fintech ecosystem, and then partner with others who have got those strengths that maybe we have got weaknesses, and work together for the benefit of our customers and the customers of our customers, if in a corporate context. So it's really about reaching out, being open, and stop thinking in silos. I think it's also very important. I think that always came out, clearly what you've said. We are not silos anymore. We can't, if we do that, we will go out of business, we will become extinct. But it's really about communicating, working together, and globally reaching solutions, and not forgetting, those customer segments who have been ignored in the past, who have been unbanked. Also, we've got lots of freelancers, SMEs, those segments which have been unprofitable. And all of a sudden now, with APIs, they become profitable serviced, and a great business opportunity. So with that, I would like to thank you all for your time as my panel members. You were fantastic. Thank you for being so honest, for sharing your expertise and your vision for the future. And thank you for our audience. Thank you for calling in and for joining us at SFF 2020. And I would like to hand over now to our moderator.